Académie d'été. Pharmaco. Académie d'été. Rétention tertiaire.
Organologie.
Méganthropologie.
I will present two parts. One is an essay I'm writing at the moment, which deals with these three concepts that play a very important role in my life. So in part it is also biographical, autobiographical. The three terms that define my work and my life. And in the second part, I will present some of the projects that we're doing right now, because Bernard asked me to explicitly talk about collaboration and to see, what we can do together. But first I want to speak about this, this conceptual, this theoretical work that I'm doing more or less on the side, I have to say. So this is not my main occupation. I'm running the institute, but every now and then I focus on theoretical issue. Okay, so these three terms, you could say, are, as I said, part of maybe even a chronology. And so, to be very short, of course, the media for me started off in the 70s and of course 80s. This was a defining term. The network theory appeared really as something for me in the late 80s and of course the 90s, and I've been working on that ever since, and my institute is called the Institute of Network Cultures. So I have a very strong personal investment and interest in this term. However, since probably the last decade, an unprecedented and maybe also unexpected form of centralization has happened in the world of the networks. And through this centralization, this new term of the platform emerged. And so we are confronted with this. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is trying to consider how these three terms, how these three modes, I wouldn't say modes of being, but let's say modes of society, modes of production, how they relate. Maybe there is one term missing. Maybe it's emerging. I have not fully focused on it, but I can see that there is a fourth term that is really that I should include, and that is infrastructure, infrastructure. And so what we see also in the scholarly work, in the activism, in everywhere. There is some kind of a new relation or a new divide, if you like, division of labor. One that is focused on the platform, which is maybe in a very banal Hegelian way, a synthesis on a higher level. The other one is maybe even a more, materialistic Freudian one, which goes all the way down. And all the way down, there is the infrastructure, right? And the platform and the infrastructure, of course, they're ultimately related, because the platforms cannot exist without the infrastructure. There's no way. But yeah, there's an interesting divide and relationship happening there. My work is not so much focusing on the infrastructure, but if you look at Facebook and Google, they are absolutely obsessed with creating and owning the new infrastructure, right? For a long time, we have more or less neglected that part. And where they come together is, of course, in the study of the data centers. So the centrality of the platform materializes in the data center, and the data center is at the very center of the new infrastructure, right? So this is where the two meet, if you like. Okay. For the time being, however, I focus on the realignment, reassessment of these three terms. I want to start with the term media, which I have to say is slipping away. It's becoming historicized and becoming less relevant. If we look at the current literature, if we look, media are becoming less important, and this is interesting to witness as a media theorist myself, being very much influenced by German media theory, coming from the Kittler school. And being so, let's say, focused on the materiality, on the apparatus of the media, right? But in the past, we already knew that the media were always partial media, and that there was no singular media, right? And that there was something on the horizon, and that was called the promise of the media to end all media, right? This is kind of already embodied in the Gesamtkunstwerk of Richard Wagner, the promise that we would overcome this focus on the partial media, right? However, the history of the media show that this whole idea of multimedia, which was quite a promise even in the 90s, did not deliver. And this is because the media have really developed its own history, practice, professional codes. Yeah, look at film, theater. Yeah, they have very, very strong practices, institutional practices and cultures. And these cultures, they've been cultivated over the last 50 years, right? So if we think of media, we think of those partial media, and we think of the traditions that these media have developed. Look at radio, for instance. Now, of course, continuing in podcasting, but nonetheless, having a very strong, let's say, a tradition, a vocabulary, training, and so on, right? So, when the digital arrived on the scene, really, as a general principle in the 90s, it was not really able to eliminate those media. And this is kind of, this is not a problem, I would say, but it's something that we should acknowledge, maybe 20, 30 years later. That the digital, as a general principle, has not really eliminated all these practices. It did not lead to a general understanding of the media as such, if there's ever going to be something like that. Instead, what we see, of course, is a continuous, retromania of the formats. So this is really reviving the book, reviving the vinyl, you name it. Wherever you look, for sure, at some point we will have a retromania of the television. It's not yet there, but for sure, at some point, television will make its comeback, and this is, of course, if we follow David Reynolds' writings on this notion, the retromania, he writes his book on the retromania of the music styles. The impossibility of popular music to invent new styles. So ever since the 1980s, with rap and so on, it has been impossible to invent new styles, and I find his analysis is still very, very interesting. That there is a lack of avant-garde at that level, which, to be honest, we always thought there was, but maybe retrospectively we have to admit that even the new media, as we call them, and this term, of course, is very much associated with me and with my generation of scholars, artists, activists. That we have not been able to produce this avant-garde, right? So there is what I see is that there is a growing gap, therefore, between those institutional practices of these partial media that become more and more historicized, if you like. I don't know what you think of, French film, for instance. We can discuss that. What's the future of this format, of this mode of production, of this way of narrating? But yeah, these are very serious discussions. If we have no vested interest, if we are not film directors or owning a cinema chain or something like that, yeah. But we should be able to discuss this. As a matter of fact, we cannot, right? It's almost impossible to have an open discussion about the future of these formats, right? So what we see is that the citizen has no real interest, no investments in these partial media anymore. This is so. Whereas the institutional practice of those expressions continue, the citizen, maybe as consumer, is still more or less willing to buy sometimes something, of course, much less than in the past. Because the citizen, of course, has been reprogrammed as a user, right? The citizen in this context, in this digital context, no longer exists in that sense. This is a problem. So there is a growing gap, and this is visible in at least in every European country, between the citizen as the user and the cultural, let's say, and intellectual elite of the country, right? So this has been lamented on every level, but we can also see that. This asks, this maybe puts also the question a looming crisis of the media theory, because we can see in the scholarly works that are happening in the media and media studies departments, that more and more, step by step, very unconsciously, without this being discussed, the work there is historicized, right? The work is no longer relevant in the present, and if we're talking about media scholars, we are talking about people who do historical work. This is quite remarkable in a way. So almost the whole field there is kaltgestellt. It is no longer relevant in the past. And this is, of course, a problem for young people who go there to study, who think, okay, I'm going to study media and communication or something like that in an academic context. And they are confronted with a massive amount of, historical work, right? So this is a problem. Whereas the young people are very much invested in the present day practices of the networks. So this is a problem, right? An additional problem is also that, of course, there is no, let's say, critical practice. So, because what is critical media studies these days? It is very difficult. We could say, okay, it's a little bit of maybe post-colonial work or cultural studies work, but then we're already drifting off in other disciplines. We say, yes, in society, gender and racism, these are real problems, and these problems are reproduced in the media, and in the media we should deconstruct these cultural practices. And so this is probably the maximum of the critical work that we can achieve. One of the problems there is what is being done here in Épinay for me, and what you are doing here is what is, of course, lacking is a theory that is based on a speculative science fiction, right? If you are committed only to historical work and say, sorry, I cannot say anything about the present because it's too complicated, I don't know, then you've all but given up, in my view, right? And in my feeling, this summer school or this direction that we are taking here has not given up that basic willingness to design a theory that can play a role in the future, right? This is because the claim in the future is absolutely, or at least in the present, is very, very important. So. This is difficult for me to accept because I have grown up, not only grown up with it, spent most of my life in this environment, and I can see it's becoming more and more irrelevant. Okay, let's move to the second concept then. Because the network, of course, in the 1990s had a promise to be something else, right? The network is, of course, a critique of the media in the classic sense, namely the media as a top-down communicator. Here you have the communicator, here's the receiver, and you know the whole model, right? The network promised to blow up these hierarchies in the communication sphere, and maybe they did. I don't want to spend too much time on the network theory. Unfortunately, the network theory remained very small, quite insignificant. There is a mathematical school in it, but very small. There's a school around, let's say, a few sociologists who are still working on the network, but by and large, the network is still associated with a set of almost good sounding principles that people after they've assessed the world's misery and everything that is wrong, they will go back and go back to these principles. And we all know the principles of the network, right? It is distributed nature. It's its potential to build larger structures, so-called federated structures. It has a peer-to-peer promise in it. The word that comes back nowadays a lot, of course, is that it has this decentralized aspect. Or nowadays, in economic terms, we are also talking about, the renaissance of the association or the cooperative and so on, right? So these are all terms that we associate with the potential of the network, right? So the term network. I think has very much almost disappeared, funny enough. So 20 years later, we can say that not only has there not been done a lot of theorization, but the network has, of course, been superseded by the third term in a very, very rapid way. Before the network could realize its own potential, right? Its energies were submerged by the platform, right? And we can also say that this is the success of the platform, right? Because without being, going into a conspiracy, we can say that the platform is a parasite, is a parasitic in nature, right? This is the problem. Of course, we can say, in Hegelian terms, it's very different because it's a synthesis. It's something that grows to a higher, more mature level, right? We could look at it from that kind of evolutionary or even revolutionary perspective. That, if you're maybe a bit more skeptical about those Hegelian schemes, you might think that this is not really the way to go, right? So before I go to the platform, I still want to say that I personally have not given up on the network. So I still see that there is a potential there, and that a lot of the, let's say, alternative approaches ultimately will take up this, what we might call kind of the vitalist impulse of the network, namely that there is a degree of autonomy. There is a degree of maybe decision there to reorganize the social, to reorganize the potential of coming together, right? So in a lot of the ideas that circulate about the commons, we see that the commons does not really exist without that vitalist element, right? Otherwise, it is just dead public infrastructure, and we know what happens to dead public infrastructure, right? It is taken away from us overnight. It is privatized, it is demolished, it is, if we want to defend, let's say, our public infrastructure that we build together, there must be some kind of vitalist element in a network structure or not, depending on how you look at it. An association, a cooperative, etc., to defend the commons, right? So to build it up is one thing, but to defend it is really a whole other thing that, in my view, in the next 10 years, we will massively confront. Not only are we going to build commons, but we have to defend them, right? And this is going to require quite a lot of strategic thinking in that respect. Okay, so going to the platform. I'm not going to talk so much here about the origin of the term or platform capitalism for that matter. I'm more interested in the speculative potential that it has, because obviously when we're talking about the platform, we are talking about a defeat. So the rise of the platform starts with the defeat, with the submersion of the rhizomatic network potential, right? So this is a problem. So how do we deal? How do we deal with this? I have not seen a lot of work that deals with this strategic question. Are we going to demolish and destroy the platforms while at the same time building our own platforms and so on, right? What does it mean to destroy a platform? Are we going to, maybe in a French statist kind of regulatory way, are we just going to declare some laws and just, forbid them altogether? Is this our strategy towards the platform? Do we believe in classic political intervention, if you like, to hold off the rise of these platforms? Okay, I'm very influenced, and I still go back a lot to Benjamin Bratton's work, because, it is the most sophisticated theory that we have right now about this question. I don't think he really asks a lot of strategic questions, but it is interesting to see how he's able to summarize the rise of the platforms. He calls the stack, which the stack is kind of an Uber platform. So the stack, so there are different stacks, and if you count them all up, you have a kind of an even larger structure than the platforms themselves, because platforms, remember, they are still partial. They are not, because a platform always deals just with the social media question or with taxis, or with farms, or medicine, or all these different. And the platforms have, at least for the time being, they're not coming together. So they will remain partial, right? So in agriculture, we will see a lot of new platforms coming up, but they will not necessarily be related to the platforms that we know in, let's say, education or medicine or communication, for that matter. Where they come together, of course, is in the infrastructure, right? This is why the infrastructure is on the long term an even more a more strategic term, right? Whereas the platforms might remain partial. Might be very big and very influential, but still partial. The infrastructure, on the other hand, can be general. And of course, the Amazon Web Services is the first one that kind of where we get an idea of what an infrastructure could look like. And this is what Benjamin Breton describes. So basically, he's kind of the theorist of the Amazon Web Services. He calls it planetary computation. Yeah, planetary computation. This is his central term, and everything that he theorizes has this idea of planetary computation as a starting point. Now, you could also say planetary computation, that is something like the cloud. Or at least the naive idea, the Californian idea of the cloud, right? Not the cloud that exists in the real life, because the cloud in real life is very different from the visions of the Californian tech elite. Because already immediately after the rise of the cloud was cut in a lot of different pieces for regulatory reasons, right? The cloud is officially not even able and it's not allowed to communicate between, let's say, the European cloud or the French cloud and the American cloud for all sorts of reasons, right? 10 years ago, it was a little bit different. So it started off with this idea that there was a planetary computation. Breton still believes in this, and for Benjamin Breton, the whole, Great Firewall in China doesn't really exist. It's an exception, right? China is an exception. Russia is an exception. The European cloud is also an exception, and so on, right? So this is a kind of a little bit of a weak starting point. So to rethink planetary computation, I think would be a very good, issue if we want to really think through the platform and its relation to the infrastructure. So. Is the platform, this is my question, is the platform the materialization of the Great Regression? So this is I don't know if have you read the Great Regression, the book, the kind of manifesto of a lot of European intellectuals. It's kind of Anyway, so this is the problem. The Great Regression also suggests that there is this kind of setback which I think is definitely happening here. After the so-called scale-free networks, the platforms arise, and the question really is: are we confronted here with a coherent whole? So this is the problem, maybe. And Benjamin Breton is really good if you want to confront this question of the totality, in his words, the totality as a design challenge. So this is his big project. And in his understanding, this stack is not replacing the state, but absorbs it, right? So this is an important distinction that we have to make. So we're not talking really about state machines. And this is his opening statement. The platform is not a state machine. It's kind of obvious, even within let's say, the Chinese context. This is very obvious. There's a multitude of very, very important emerging platforms inside China, and none of them are owned or run by the Communist Party or by a state-owned firm, for that matter, right? So this is very. This is, of course, a correct observation. So the platform is not a state machine. So so I want to go now to the Benjamin Breton's book. Has a lot of inspiring elements in it, also to critique it. And this book I want to briefly mention here, obviously because it has a similarity to my own title, Machine, Platform, Crowd. It comes from two MIT professors in business, so they work in the Sloan School of Management. Maybe you've seen their famous book. It's called The Second Machine Age. So this is the follow-up of that particular book. And this kind of sums up how what I call the liberal Google tech elite looks at how they look at this topic. So they are not so much part of the Californian elite. They're much closer to let's say the Boston, New York, Washington East Coast business elite. And interesting enough, this book is quite ambivalent, especially towards the end of this question: if the platform can rule everything, right? So this is, of course, the critique of Eugene Morozov, who says the aim of the tech elite is to come up with solutionism, right? We have the solutionism, maybe technological solutionism, as he calls it. It is we have a solution for every problem. So and this book kind of comes to the conclusion that that platforms can only really be utilized when cheap labor can be eliminated. And so the big problem here of this book is, what is the future of the expert? What is the future of knowledge, for that matter? Right? Yeah. And so it clearly states that that expert knowledge cannot be eliminated by the platform. All right? And this is interesting because it also means that there is a limit on the horizon. All right, we can eliminate an X amount of millions of jobs, but not all jobs. This is interesting, right? And here they come up with this very kind of moderate, almost social democratic idea. We need to rethink the balance, right? And so a lot of the tech elite in the next couple of decades will be busy with designing and reassessing the balance. All right, so balance is the new expertise, if you like, because the infrastructure is cheap. The cloud is cheap, and it's only getting more cheap as we know. So this is kind of almost a done deal. This is no longer the issue. The infrastructure is there. Maybe you don't have enough infrastructure yet, and then you will build some more over the next years or decades. So the new the critical assessment, the critical knowledge, if you like, is in the balancing of these three levels that they identify.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
How would you translate balance in French, for example?
Équivalent, yeah. Équilibre, oui. Yeah.
No, I will not interrupt.
No. So yeah, obviously, for instance, there's this problem. For instance, that people fear that once the platform is introduced, it will destroy the product. It will destroy the production altogether. Right? This is a problem. So whereas in the naive Hegelian idea there is a synthesis, once we get there, the whole thing collapses. Right? This is a problem of introducing. Why? And this book explains that it's got to do with if the price go low, nobody will produce the product or service anymore, right? This is a problem. So there is kind of a minimum level somewhere. And so far, the people who are building the platforms, they don't really think about that. So we could say this is kind of second stage thinking of the platform. Not only to introduce them, to roll them out, to create the monopoly, but then after you have the monopoly, what happens if you have destroyed the market altogether, right? Instead of having a dream of kind of facilitating, you are not facilitating, you are destroying. And anyway. And the same could be said of the relationship between, for instance, the human mind and machine intelligence. This book comes For instance, with the idea that quantitative computing in financial markets, like financial hedge funds, that kind of thing, that this activity can and should be crowdfunded itself. Right? So instead of being in the hands of only two people who know the secret algorithm and who define and who dominate the financial market because they have the fastest machines, the fastest networks, the best algorithms, the idea here is to crowd fund this enterprise, for instance, which is really, of course, a completely different approach from what is actually going on right now. And the same we could say, in the relation between the core and the crowd, right? So the core here is, of course, the core as defined by the experts, by the programmers, by the hedge funds, by the geeks, right? So so that is a rebalance. One of the problems here, and this has been identified by Matteo Pasquinelli and by others a long time ago, in fact, is that this kind of thinking is not really talking about a redistribution or the political question of a redistribution of the so-called platform surplus, right? So how do we deal with this? Is this a political question? And I think this will be a question also for the Macron administration, right? Because to suggest that platforms will be built everywhere in France, you can already see it happening in a couple of years. Everybody will talk about it, right? But the real issue there is not that the French people are brilliant coders and that they can build beautiful platforms. No, this is not the issue. We know they can. The problem is, will inside these platforms the issue be addressed of the redistribution of the platform surplus? And if this is not addressed, the platforms will eventually only make things worse, right? They will not save the local agricultural markets and so on, right? Unless this kind of, the issue of the parasite, I mean, I don't know if it has to be named that explicit, but this is the problem. And other people call it a bit more friendly cloud feudalism, right? So cloud feudalism is the problem that comes after the introduction. Feudalism, yeah. That's another term used. Also by Benjamin Breton also uses this term, by the way. Yeah.
I suggest we stop now. I'm sorry, because we should continue with Frank now.
Okay. Yeah. That's.
Because if not, we will not have time for discussion.
Yep. Okay.
I think here the discussion is extremely important on this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I can stop here.
Of cooperation
yeah, in the afternoon or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay.